Ladies and gentlemen, if a wonderful, morally superior, beautiful liberal Democrat looks at the Durham probe and says, well, Michael Horowitz, the Inspector General, already looked at this. There was no bias. Everyone was apolitical. They were just focused on the country and protecting national security. There was no bias. They weren't after Trump. I mean, you have people who truly believe that Clapper and Brennan and Comey and Strzok and McCabe, that Peter Strzok, when he says, we'll stop Trump, when he literally texts the lovely Lisa Page that we'll stop Trump, Trump is a menace, Trump voters are smelly, they truly believe there's no bias there. That they were just, the Steele dossier was raw intelligence. I happened to be purchased by Clinton, but James Comey didn't know this. Anyway, you have to understand the world we live in. There are articles now about Marie Yovanovitch, one of the witnesses in the impeachment that they couldn't prove, by the way. It's being reported that Trump withheld assistance. He didn't. He didn't withhold anything. They got the lethal aid eventually. They were always going to get the lethal aid. There was a period of, a momentary period of time that would have taken place in any administration to ensure that the proper people got the lethal aid. Okay, that country, the wonderful alliance that Democrats worship in Europe, didn't allow that country into the alliance because of alleged corruption. So Trump was just waiting. And President Zelensky himself stated that he was never pressured, ever. But they still impeached him, and they're now writing that, Trump withheld it. Never happened. And also, the horrible events in Europe are taking place under President Exumbody's tenure, not Trump. Anyway, the sky is falling, but at least Trump isn't in office, and he's not tweeting, so, the media is fine. The actual sky is falling. Like, the economy's in the tank. We're going to experience a devastating stock market crash. We've already seen the market crash. I predicted all of this in the Federalist. Read that article below in the pinned comment last October. And subscribe to the Stock Market Crash channel. Subscribe to this channel. Hit subscribe. We're almost at 200,000 subs, people. We're like right next to 195,000. Hit subscribe. Tell your friends about this channel. But getting back to what Democrats or media might say about the Durham probe, they'd say, well, there was no bias at all. They just really believed that Trump was installed by you-know-who. Okay. What Michael Horowitz stated was that he did not find, quote, this is a National Review article, he did not find documentary or testimonial evidence that political bias or improper motivation influenced the decisions to open the 4 individual investigations into Page, Papadopoulos, Flynn, and Manafort. Now listen to the doublespeak here. George Orwell defined euphemisms as verbal refuse, and he wasn't a fan of doublespeak, obviously. And you are hiding the truth within a barrage, within this verbose legalese. So let's just break this down. It's pretty easy, okay? If you go to your wife and you have lipstick on your collar, and she says, "Where have you been? Where have you been?" And you say, "Excuse me, have you found any direct documentary or testimonial evidence that romantic bias or improper romance influenced the decision for this lipstick on my collar? I'm sorry, excuse me, you're the one who owes me the apology." No. But think about this. He did not. This is what the Durham probe is investigating. This is the heart of what the Durham probe is all about. Documentary or testimonial evidence. So it's not just, there's documentary and testimonial evidence that they went after Trump. But wait a second. Documentary or testimonial evidence that political bias or improper motivation influenced the decisions. So Horowitz couldn't find documentary evidence that improper motivation influenced decisions. Well, you're not going to find documentary evidence among government officials who literally lie to FISA judges like Kevin Kleinsmith. You're not going to find any of that. They're going to fill out the paperwork in a manner that deceives intent. It's not rocket science. This is not rocket science. That's the whole point of the Durham probe. You have government officials working alongside corrupt and biased and corrupt and biased government officials, intel officials, DOJ officials working alongside FBI officials working alongside media, and either directly or indirectly with the Clinton campaign and Democrats. And then you have third-party tech firms that that are getting paid and hired by Democrats to give them whatever narrative they want. They take that narrative to government agencies, then the narrative is used to investigate Trump. It's not rocket science. The Steele dossier was purchased. The company that looked at DNC servers was hired by the Democrats. Michael Sussman, who was just indicted by Durham, was hired by Clinton. And he lied about who hired him to Baker at the FBI, who, by the way, knew. So Sussman, in a way, is right. The defense for Michael Sussman could take down this whole thing. This whole edifice could be taken down just if Michael Sussman truly defends himself. You could say, look, everybody knew what I was doing. Are you kidding? Yeah, of course I worked with the tech executive and Georgia Tech researchers and people who were paid by DARPA to look at DNC servers and spread the Steele dossier and set up and frame Trump. Of course, everybody knew that. Michael Sussman could just take down the whole thing. He could just tell the truth, which would be a crime. Also, so maybe he can't take down the whole thing. 18 U.S. Code 371 could get a whole lot of people, including McCabe and Comey. I write about that in The Federalist. I wrote a lot about the Durham probe in The Federalist. Just type in H.A. Goodman Durham probe. Rush Limbaugh shared one of my articles about how everything emanates from the Clinton campaign. And by the way, I want Madam Secretary, I want Hillary Clinton to be nominee. We need a rematch. Trump-Clinton 2. Okay? We need that. We need that. We've been through too much as a society and a world. We need that. We can't have mashed potato. Well, he's not mashed potato brains. President exhumed body is not running again. And so, it has to be Hillary Clinton. It has to. She has to go up against Trump. If she wins, okay. She'll be better than Biden, but it'll be a catastrophe, but she'll be better than Biden. Anyone's better than Biden. He is more horrendous and inept and incompetent than anyone could have ever imagined. But you wouldn't know with media. But anyway, look, I digress. Has to be Clinton versus Trump. Has to. That would be amazing. I'll vote for Trump, obviously, a million times over. But all of this was because Democrats lost and they couldn't stand losing. They're the same people who complain about results not being honored, and they complain about results not being honored, and then they say, how dare you not accept results? Anyway, so Horowitz did not find documentary or testimonial evidence that political bias or improper motivation. Documentary or testimonial evidence. You're not going to get an actual document that says we are going to set up and frame Trump. There is never going to be a testimony from James Clapper saying, we knew there was no evidence, but we framed everything with high to moderate confidence, knowing that media would not care about the lack of direct evidence. Knowing that media and intel officials and the DOJ would just start a Mueller probe based on suspicion alone. You're not going to find that. You're not going to find a piece of paper saying, we set up and framed Trump. That's why when Horowitz says he did not find documentary or testimonial evidence that political bias or improper motivation influenced the decisions to open up 4 investigations, you're never going to find that because the people who set up and framed Trump were smart enough to either lie like Kevin Kleinsmith did, who was eventually indicted, or utilize Steele dossiers that had subsources like Igor Danchenko, who was indicted, or Sussman, who lied about who hired him. And then Baker said, well, gosh, this is documentary evidence on Trump. Wait a second, this documentary evidence was purchased by Clinton? What's going on here? Yeah, that's the whole point. And media they blocked and silenced any discussion about Hunter's laptop. They said it was unverified. It was from the other country. It's the Kremlin. It's the Kremlin. And it was genuine. Anything that hurts Democrats, if you don't have categorical absolute proof, you can't talk about it. But with Trump, everything is fair game. And they can start investigations and investigate just based on suspicion or accusations. No direct evidence at all. There was never any direct evidence that he withheld aid from that country because he wanted to investigate poor mashed potato brains. There was never any evidence of that. And just because he was impeached, they impeached Trump. They would have impeached Trump every day for 4 years if they could. And they said very openly, well, you don't need to prove it in the court of law. You could impeach if you want to. So the impeachment meant less than nothing, zero. Anyway, give me your thoughts below. Hit subscribe to this channel right now.